thought what we can do now is just kind of like taking inspiration from the wonderful collaboration between Simon Starling and the mask maker he worked with, to kind of like think through the different ways of how we've working together, and trying to look at the cues and the possibilities that there are in how people work with each other. As Palle said to me the other day, kind of like also collaborating with Noh, one of the reasons why we're here. So I quite like this personification. And if I just hand it over directly to you over there, do you want to start talking a little bit, Palle and Ermi, about your way, how you work together? And I know that this has been a very long endeavor. So.
Okay, yes. Yeah, thank you, Wiebke and Akiko-san, for inviting us. We are really happy to be here. So Palle and I have collaborated since 1997, so we worked together for a long time. So this time I wanted to look at masculinity, how it is performed in traditional Japanese dance and theater. So first I started with the form, that means the dance, based on the dances I've studied the last 15 years in Japan with my sensei, Nishikawa Senrei. And then also because Wiebke, you said it would be about masks, I knew that I wanted to work with masks, that I haven't done so much. So not only with the mask, but also can the mask be somebody outside yourself, in this case, your son, but also facial expressions. So in Noh, they are like the lower gods, when they are angry, they become like demons. And I think the anger of a parent can really be this demon. So I wanted to try that without the mask, but of course it's a mask too. And then we also wanted to work with the Noh drama Atsumori, that I loved for a very long time, and focusing on this hesitation, like you're systemized, you're a killer, but when you're a parent and you're going to kill a child, and there's a hesitation. So we wanted to look at that. And now maybe you should say something about the music.
As you say, Wiebke, it's a collaboration with Ami, and it's a collaboration with Noh. And for me, that started in 1989 when I was a composition student, and I had a CD with Noh, and it was the strangest music I ever heard. And so it became my favorite CD. And then I started working with Noh musicians in Kyoto in 2001, and I studied it there. But it's never been the case of imitating it. But I'm a contemporary composer. I work with very experimental techniques these days, but I prefer acoustic sounds. And in this particular thing, what I bring in when we start working, because the story is by Ami and the concept, what I bring in is the concept, musical concept. In this case, Atsumori had a flute. It's a very important thing thematically. So I wanted to work with the flute sound, which of course is quite natural in Noh, but I use a toy organ instead, which is processed to become these ghostly flute notes. And I also needed a percussion ensemble. I can't do all of it myself, so I sort of programmed my machines to learn the rhythms I play and repeat them according to various formulas. And then I sort of build an orchestra tool set that I bring in for when we start rehearsing. And then I find the sort of the limits of that tool set, the span, what I can use, and what the contrasts and the moods I can create according to the story that we want to tell. And that is very much a process that is live and has to be done in a rehearsal room together, and also all details are improvised. But the skeleton, I know very much what I want to do all the time, but the single notes are not decided.
Thank you, Palle. What I really, really appreciate about Simon Starling's collaboration with his Noh mask maker is that they very much stay true to themselves, but they kind of like have these moments of taking on something from the other. And how does that work with you? I mean, you're also taking a classical Japanese play as a starting point, like Simon Starling does, and then uses the skeleton of that in some way or other to tell a different story. How is that in your case?
Well, talking about collaboration, again, it's like we're also collaborating with deceased masters. So, I mean, I had to read also the thoughts of Siami of this play. And I was so happy that the problems I have with the stereotype masculinity, he also had in the late 1300s. So he helped me to, I mean, I started with a body, like this form, and then I wanted to comment it. But I have also found support from Siami's texts that he said, don't play these warrior plays, they are boring, unless you put a very sensitive man. And there is this gender fluidity in all the Japanese dramas that I love so much and I find very interesting. So it's like you can go in and out of different genders, like man, woman, God. It's like floating. So, yeah, I was a bit surprised that Siami and I thought the same.
That's lovely, and obviously he, has been writing about how a warrior, you don't just play with a stamping foot. You have to put a lot of sensitivity to the other part of that character. So that's quite interesting to see in your performance. And Ignacio and Andrew, I mean, gender fluidity is kind of an interesting moment also for your play, the way you've been rehearsing all these different roles and bringing them together. Do you want to talk a little bit about, how you two work together and how you come to conceive the play, then also with Merkel Finnessy, who was involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this play had its genesis in this obsessive thought that I had after seeing again and again, time and again, Puccini's opera, closing on, Butterfly being dead, Pinkerton sometimes running away or just, having nothing to do with the scene, and this little child with an American flag and a doll or something, and blindfolded. And this very dramatic and very strong music, beautiful opera, probably one of the most iconic operas nowadays, is the opera that everybody knows. And the curtain closes there. That's the end of the opera. And for me, that's the beginning of the drama, where what happens to that child? So we discussed that particular issue, and this is our third collaboration. Andrew and I have been working since 2006, 8, something like that. And this is the third collaboration that we have, the most probably ambitious of them all, because we included, Michael Finnessy, who agreed to. I was looking for a student of his, actually. When I approached him, I said, would you have a student that would be interested in doing this kind of job? And he says, yeah, maybe yes, but I am interested in it, so I might do it. So fortunately, he had time, and the constellation came together. And something I didn't know, he's a great fan of Puccini. He likes his music a lot. And he thought the idea of commenting on his music, of using his rhythms and some of his themes to create this score would be very interesting. And so all of a sudden I had, all the elements to create a piece of work that might have been, a stripped down version of an opera, keeping all the dramatic expression, the big dramatic story line, and the music, just reduced to its most intimate expression.
But I think what is interesting is that Puccini actually has no knowledge of Japan whatsoever and makes all sorts of terrible blunders. So what we found interesting was, first and foremost, there was a Japanese company that did a performance that sort of tried to rectify some of the mistakes. And then we realized that the play was about East meets West, and what happened. So we had a Western opera, and we thought about how we could go into the Eastern forms, and Ignacio became very interested in Noh Theatre, and we realized it had something that was incredibly powerful for this piece, which is ghosts, because ghosts are very powerful presences in this play, and to be able to actually put them actually onto the stage rather than them being metaphorically there was something that was incredibly powerful. So it became intrinsic that the form was actually following the story, although at the very beginning, we never realized quite how much we were going to be getting into the Eastern forms, but actually now, sitting here, what must be about 3 or 4 years later, it seems incredible we never thought about it, but that's the nature of collaborations, really, that as you go along, you meet more people, and more people bring more ideas, and suddenly you realize they should have been there all along.
Yeah, somehow the play asked, as we went along, asked for input, particularly, you know, when we kind of collided with Noh, we kind of thought, well, this is what it was, you know, asking to investigate and to be integrated into the work. But going back to the gender fluidity, in my work I always play men, women, you know, gods, demons, and everything in between. So in this one, I wanted to bring forward or to continue this character work. And I do Suzuki, who is now an old woman, and Butterfly, who has a very characteristic way of expressing herself, and then the ghosts, and then the father, and then Tomisaburo, who is the son, and you know there is a whole pantheon of ghosts and characters that I play myself through physicality, for which Noh has been also very important.
Thank you, Ignacio. And you know, Andrew, how did you actually start writing a libretto for this? I mean, I know how Ignacio came to Noh as a structuring device in many ways.
Yeah.
It's something we can talk about later, maybe. But how did you start thinking about how text and dance and image would come together?
Well, the first idea was came from the idea of Waiting for Pinkerton, which of course comes from the original play, and we needed at the very beginning, the very first time it was actually shown, was a platform performance, which we actually were very successful in. We actually won some money to actually develop the whole piece. But to try and explain everything, we had to have a narrator, because we're just going to show a very small part of it. And I suddenly realized the narrator, who's singing at the very beginning and is explaining everything, could actually take us behind stage. So the original story I had in 5 minutes, but actually as you explored it, you came into all these different theatre forms. So it was a slow journey. You have the initial idea of, yes, let's make him governor of Atlanta. He's in the middle of an election campaign. What's the worst thing that can happen in the middle of an election campaign? Particularly if you're campaigning for Christian family values, your illegitimate child turning up. I mean, I don't think that would be very good for your campaign. So I thought, right, that gives you a very good reason why he wouldn't actually want to meet his son, beyond the fact that obviously his wife won't be very keen on the idea. And from that idea, you get the beginning of the story. But how do you present it when you've only got one character? Once again, the Japanese form of the narrator actually allowed us to do an awful lot there.
Thank you, Andrew. So one of the themes, obviously, that are going through both of your plays is this idea of the child and the lost child in many ways. But the other thing that I'm picking out of the performance is obviously the flute and all the different elements of this flute, and how the flute is a body in the same way as it is a structuring device. And I know that you two have been working together before. Do you want to start maybe talking about that a bit?
No, I think you should talk about...
I can talk later.
Your...
Let's talk about the music first.
No, because it doesn't make sense, because you had the original idea.
The original idea. I mean, actually all of us were kind of like interested in Noh as a structuring device, is something where the form is kind of like very, very solid, and at the same time something that is extremely fluid in the way of how it is using different elements. And for me, an interesting moment was always to try and think, okay, how can I with photography try and find a translation of Noh into something that is as still as Noh can be, but also as fast as potentially Noh can be. So I was kind of like looking to dissect really elements from Noh and trying to see how I can put them into photography. And you saw me today decollaging elements that I found even further into even smaller units. And one of the main elements, gestures, if you like, I was interested in is this moment of where the mask meets the face and what's potentially happening between this mask and the face. And there's this thing that comes out of the beginning of Noh Theatre, where the actor in the green room meets the mask, and he meets the mask as a person. And there's a lot of interesting storytelling around this idea of how the mask and the person meet, and how the expression potentially is taken on into the body, into the dancing body then, and onto the stage, if you like. And I was interested in this moment, between, skin of mask and skin of face. I was then, aware, obviously, of David and his work with Noh, flute, and ideas of taking sounds forward into what I have a quite bodily experience too. So it was just kind of like wondering how you would...
Well, I think what happened, it was similar to the Michael Finnessy story, because you said to me about a year and a half ago, do you know anybody who'd be interested to do some music for a piece about Noh Theatre? And I said, yes, me. And there are a few reasons for that. I had written an opera called Star-Shaped Biscuit, and that was performed in Aldborough. And I'd got very interested in... Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears went on a kind of world tour, and they arrived in Japan, and they were taken to the Noh Theatre, and Britten and Pears just broke out into unstoppable laughter. And everybody very diplomatically said, can we go? And by that point, they were hooked. I mean, Britten was completely hooked. And he said, no, I want to stay. And he arrived back in Suffolk. He wrote these two dramas, which were inspired by the Noh, but transformed into Christian versions. And I was very interested in that. I was very interested in Britten and his encounter with Balinese music, for example, and Japanese music and Indian flute music. But you talked to me about masking, and masking was something I'd always been fascinated by. The masking of instruments, for example, in African music, the way that sounds in traditional music were distorted in various ways. Or even John Cage's prepared piano, this kind of masking of the sound of an instrument. So that, for me, was a starting point when the link with my opera. But Emmy and I have worked together quite a lot. I love Japanese flutes, and as a flute player, one of the things I feel is that the flute has become sort of over-civilized in a way. One of the aspects of the Noh that fascinates me is that instruments are really instruments of power. They're magical instruments, and they take us back to a time when people would have heard instruments as very, very powerful. Not these ultra-civilized kind of dinner party type instruments, but something really strong. So once we discussed in a very vague and circuitous way what we would do, I had the idea of asking Emmy, because I thought her flutes would go fantastically well. And I have to say, I didn't tell you anything about what we were doing. So I'm kind of interested to know how you cope with suddenly finding yourself on stage and thinking, this is what's happening. Because you play brilliantly, and it's just, here we are on stage in front of an audience.
I prepared to do improvise on the stage, but I didn't know this kind of discussion on the stage. I'm now getting nervous and nervous.
Improvise.
So now I'm thinking, don't ask me any questions.
But actually, I have a new album about to come out, and Emmy plays on a track which she hasn't actually yet heard, which is based on the Sakuteki, this very ancient Japanese gardening book. And there's incredibly fascinating material in this book about stone setting and its relationship to taboos. In other words, the formations through which you set stones in the garden and the terrible things that can happen to you and your family if you get it wrong. And to me, there's a strong relationship to that, between that and the rhythmic approach you get in, for example, Japanese gagaku. This incredibly slow measuring, marking of time, which works on many different levels. It's called colotomic structure. That was the name given to it by a Dutch ethnomusicologist called Jaap Kunst, who worked in Java. But these measures, and they seem to work very well with your idea of working through pages, which is sequential and numerical. So I mark the time with markers, and then in between we have silence, and we have these sounds of flutes, and it's a kind of tangential relationship to the no, but I think for me it's quite strong.
Thank you, David. I mean, this idea that the masks fall back onto the faces in this moment that you can't see was very lovely. Also in Palle's and Ami's piece, where we were suddenly doing exactly what David describes as voice masking, something we were really interested in, kind of like thinking about this hollow object that then is not subject anymore, as this object, and that then makes a different sound. Do you want to maybe think about that voice for a minute before we close? Because I think we're asked to be out of here in kind of like 2 minutes, but...
I'm not trained in voice, but maybe I can just say something political about why I chose the parent. Because in the play, it's the killer who sings. It's a Buddhist prayer that you find in the original Atsumori play by Siami. And I felt that by allowing the killer, to pray for the boy's soul, you keep this kind of honor code, like the killing, that it's the business of the soldiers. So I thought it was really important that it was the parent who sang for the child instead. So, and also, to have it on my body and it's a line that it's gone forever. It's broken.
Yeah. Ignacio, you're not going to tell us what's going to happen between child and father?
No, but one of the thoughts I had is
it's an opera, so I promise you it doesn't end well.
It's a story of two words that collide. It's the story of, misunderstanding and mixed races. Someone who is, two people who come from completely different worlds and come together for different reasons, and the one butterfly thinks he is in love with her, and he's not. He just needs a woman for the 3 or 4 months he's going to be in Nagasaki. That's all. She's madly in love. So the product of that passionate, egoistical, blind passion and lust, has a life, is carrying his sins, her sins. He's loaded with fate, as are very often mixed race cultures. That's why we fear them. That's why we don't understand them. That's why, there is so much going on, oh my goodness. What are you? Where are you? Where are you from? That's the first question. Who are you? Where are you from? Why are you not Japanese? Are you American? Where are you? So this kind of terrible fate that falls upon him, is expressed in this particular opera. As you say, it's an opera, so you cannot find very well. But
when I started writing it, I sort of deliberately didn't know what would happen at the end, but within about half an hour of working on it, you realise that it could only end one way. Even if you wanted to change that, the dynamics of the story were such that there really was only one ending. And in fact, there is a sense of release at the end of it, that the story has finally finished. The ghosts have been the ghosts have been satisfied.
Somehow, yeah. Somehow, yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, all of you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Olo, thank you. It's nice to bring you all together here in London. It's been a great pleasure. I do leave you all with this, forethoughts on maybe what intercultural collaborations could be. And thank you all for coming. And stay around. There's more to happen today here at King's Place. Thank you.